Greg Ehrenberg here from Odd Chopper. We've got a great main event for Saturday's UFC card. It is Marlon Vera taking on Cruz. I'm really looking forward to that. So I've got my best bets lined up here for the card. Do me a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and leave a comment below. Let me know what it is that you guys have bets on for this weekend slate, and give yourself a chance to win some free stuff like a free week subscription to our premium betting Discord. All you have to do is place a bet below. Well, not place a bet, but post with any bets you've placed below in the comment section. Any of those bets that win, I'll be going through them and then picking some winners to give away for next week. But with that all aside, here are my favorite bets for Saturday night's card. For my first bet of the slate, I'm looking at Loopy Godinez minus 150 to win by decision over Angela Hill. And I just think there's going to be a really significant wrestling and grappling advantage in this fight going to Loopy Godinez. And when you look at Godinez's last fight, probably the best performance we've seen from her in the octagon against Ariana Conarlosi. Took her down 8 times, really dominated the fight from pillar to post. There was never a doubt that she was going to win this fight fairly convincingly. The only thing that was really in question once we got past the first round was it going to be a decision win for Godinez, or was she going to end up winning inside the decision? Ultimately ended up being a decision win, and each of the last 3 fights that Godinez has been in have gone to decision. 4 out of her 5 UFC fights have gone to decision. And when it comes to Angela Hill, I'm starting to get concerned about the mileage on her, and then also the fact that she's now lost 5 of her last 6 fights. And Angela Hill, there was a point in time where she was kind of like the women's version of Cowboy Cerrone, where it was she would fight anybody, any place, anywhere. She was taking fights on late notice. Didn't really matter who the opponent was. And she's been really competitive in a lot of those fights, and she's super tough. It is really difficult to finish Angela Hill. So if you look at some of her recent losses, she lost against Vera Jandiroba. That was a unanimous decision loss. Against Amanda Lemos, I actually thought she won that fight, but it would end up being a split decision loss and went to the judges' scorecards. A loss to Tisha Torres, that was a decision. A loss to Michelle Watterson, that was a split decision loss. And then also a loss against Claudia Gadelha, another split decision loss for Angela Hill. A couple of those fights I did think she won. So she's been in a lot of competitive fights and some controversial split decisions. But something that has really stood out to me over the course of Angela Hill's career is there was a really clear path to beating her when she was younger, which was wrestling and grappling her, just holding her in control positions. And she got better with that over the last, couple years or so, where she fought really heavy wrestling, grappling type fighters like Claudia Gadelha, like Michelle Watterson, and she was able to hold her own against those fighters. But in her last couple of fights, we've seen some more deficiencies start to pop up in the defensive wrestling department. In particular, that last fight, the loss against Vera Jandiroba, she was taken down 3 times. And while Jandiroba is a really good grappler, she's not really a great wrestler, and we typically don't see her land a whole bunch of takedowns. If you look through her recent fights, she had 1 takedown against Amanda Hebos. She had no takedowns in a win over Kanado Murata. She had 1 takedown in a loss against Mackenzie Dern. So we really typically don't see her rack up multiple takedowns in a fight, which she was able to get Angela Hill down fairly easily. And I think now that we just consider that Angela Hill's had so many professional fights and she's now 37 years old, I think she's just slowing down a little bit. Once again, really difficult to finish. The last time that we saw Angela Hill finished in a fight was all the way back in March of 2019, and that was like 8 fights ago for her. So most likely it's going to decision. I have to favor Godinez because of the grappling upside from her. And with all that in mind, we've got Godinez nearly a minus 300 favorite. We're getting a good discount on the win by decision prop. So I'm going with her minus 150 to win on the judges' scorecards. Today's show is sponsored by BetMGM. If you guys have ever wanted to place a bet with no risk of losing, that's an offer that BetMGM has for all people who sign up using our promo code OSMMA or clicking the link in the description box below, because they're going to refund your first bet up to $1,000 if it loses in the form of a free bet. So anything you feel really good about for this MMA card, you can bet it risk-free. And if it loses, you're getting your money back and you get the chance to go place another bet. So great offer to take advantage of, and it's not going to be around forever. So take advantage and sign up at BetMGM using that promo code OSMMA, or you can just sign up using that link in the description box below and take advantage of this offer. Get a risk-free bet of up to $1,000. For my next bet, I have Bruno Silva minus 134 to beat Gerald Meerschaert by KO/TKO. And It's as simple as this. Bruno Silva has massive power in his hands. He's a really aggressive on the feet. He's also a pretty good grappler, arguably better than Gerald Meerschaert. And I think a lot of people might think that Meerschaert's path to victory in this fight is to win by submission, because that's basically how Meerschaert wins the majority of his fights. But Silva might be a better grappler than him. I think this fight's probably going to take place on the feet. And considering the durability issues we've seen as of late from Meerschaert, I think there's a pretty good chance that Silva knocks him out. I favor it happening pretty frequently if these guys were to match up. Maybe 6 out of 10 times they fight, I think Silva wins inside the distance by KO. So that's why I'm favoring the minus 134 prop. And you just look at some of the massive power from Bruno Silva, where, 2 fights ago, his last win, he did have a KO over Jordan Wright. His last fight, he lost against Alex Pereira. It was a striking fight. And I mean, even just the fact that he was relatively competitive with Pereira, I think speaks volumes about Bruno Silva's ability on the feet. And then when you look at Gerald Meerschaert and some of his recent fights, there's been some wins in there, but it hasn't come without some difficulty in some of them. He gets hurt very frequently. His last fight against Krzysztof Jotko, he got hurt a bunch of times on the feet. No knockdowns officially, but we did also see a couple of fights in 2020 where he got knocked out in back-to-back fights. Of course, the fight against Khamzat Chimaev, where, we saw Gerald Meerschaert just basically get killed in, 15 seconds into the fight. First shot that landed, he was out, unconscious. Ian Heinisch, who's not really known as a powerful puncher, he was able to put Gerald Meerschaert out in about a minute into the first round of their matchup. So this is not uncommon. We see Meerschaert hurt very frequently in a lot of his fights. And going up against a guy who I consider to be a really aggressive and really a murderous power puncher in Bruno Silva, I think he puts the lights out for Gerald Meerschaert. So Bruno Silva, minus 134 by KO/TKO. For my final bet of the card, I'm looking at the main event, Marlon Chito Vera against Dominic Cruz. And I'm actually siding with Vera to win, but not just to win, but also for him to win inside the distance. That's a bet that could be had for plus 215. So pretty good odds for Vera to win before we get to the judges' scorecards. And I love Dominic Cruz. I think he's the best bantamweight in the history of the UFC. I also think he's a great commentator because there aren't too many people that have better insight into the fight game or higher fight IQ than Dominic Cruz. But also another fighter who we have to be concerned about his durability at this point in his career, because there have been numerous knee injuries for Dominic Cruz, multiple ACL tears, a whole host of other injuries that have sidelined him for a long, extended period of time. So you look at Dominic Cruz, who some of the layoffs in his career, he didn't fight from 2011 until 2014. Then he took another 2-year break until 2016, was able to stay active and regained his title, and then also was able to defend it. But then after his loss to Cody Garbrandt, another series of injuries, and we didn't see Dominic Cruz fight again from 2016 to 2020. And he's been fairly active since then. Fought once in 2020, twice in 2021. But still, we're at a point in Dominic Cruz's career where all the injuries have racked up. He is also now 37 years old, and he's gotten hurt in a lot of his recent fights. So the fight against Pedro Munoz, he did come back to win, but the first round got really dicey for Dominic Cruz. He got dropped early by Pedro Munoz. He was hurt really, really bad. And credit on him. He was able to recover, get back into the fight. He had a win over Casey Kenny. That was a good win for him. Before that was the loss against Henry Cejudo, where he got stopped in the second round. I know it was somewhat controversial because he thought that it was an early stoppage, and then also said that the ref smelled like booze and alcohol, or smelled like booze and cigarettes. But all that said, I thought it was a fine stoppage. And also, if nothing else, Cruz was clearly hurt in that fight. And then we had the fight against Cody Garbrandt, which was the fight that Dominic Cruz lost his title. Garbrandt didn't finish him inside the distance, but Cruz got dropped twice in that fight. So over his last 4 fights, Cruz has now been knocked down 4 times. And he's fighting a guy in Marlon Vera, who's one of the most durable fighters I could ever remember seeing. And nothing becomes more evident than looking at his last fight against Rob Font, where the first round, Rob Font was tuning up Marlon Vera, and he didn't care. He kept marching forward. He's taking damage. He's staying aggressive. So ultimately, Rob Font landed 271 significant strikes on Marlon Vera in that fight, and he hardly looked like he had a scratch on him at the end of that fight. He marched through all of those and just consistently hurt Rob Font, in particular at the end of a lot of rounds, where it would be fairly competitive until we got to like the 4-minute mark of the end of the second round or the third round. And Vera would just have a big moment where he'd hurt Rob Font, he'd drop him, he'd come close to finishing him. They'd go back to their corners, everybody get a time to recover, and it was just rinse and repeat. Each round would go like that. So Vera's really dangerous. He has a lot of power. It was kind of a similar story against Frankie Edgar. I thought Edgar won arguably the first 2 rounds of that fight. And then what happens? We get into the 3rd round. There's a minute left. Marlon Vera, just nasty up kick right up the middle, knocks Frankie Edgar out cold. So I think overall the power and durability of Marlon Vera, I think he's just going to march forward against Dominic Cruz. I think at some point he's going to hurt him and probably finish him. It's what we've seen from Marlon Vera. I really think he's built for 5-round fights. 3-round fights, he was winning a lot of them, but a lot of them were dicey for Vera just from a standpoint of he was almost always losing the first round. And I would expect him to lose the 1st or 2nd round against Dominic Cruz as well. But the later we get into the fight, the more that Vera is going to take over, his pressure, his power, and just the age, the declining durability of Dominic Cruz and all the injuries that have accumulated. I think the most likely outcome in this fight is that Vera ends up finishing him, and we're getting plus 215 odds from the win inside the distance. So that is my bet for the main event on Saturday. So to recap my picks for this weekend's card, I've got Loopy Godinez minus 150 to win by decision, Bruno Silva minus 134 to win by TKO/KO. And then finally, Marlon Vera plus 215 to win inside the distance in the main event. Those are my favorite bets of the card, all things I have money on. But of course, I want to know what you guys have bets on. So leave me a comment below in the comment section, and I'll be reading them. I'll be interacting with some of you guys, then giving away some free stuff next week. Other than that, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Good luck, and enjoy the card this weekend.